Welcome, everybody, to another podcast of the Black Dog Confessional. Redbird's not here tonight. We actually sent him home for this one. He gets a little sensitive sometimes when we start talking about weapons. I'm joking, he doesn't. He's just he's at home doing a baseball thing with the family. So I brought in big old Drew tonight to be the fill-in for Chris.
Little alumni
For the podcast. He's been here before, so he knows what to do. And I'm going to geek out a little bit tonight, everybody. I promise you I'm going to geek out a little bit tonight. Anybody who's known me for any amount of time knows I'm like a huge knife collector. And tonight we have Alan Folts, who is a knife designer, knife maker, everything that's on this table that we're going to be playing around with. Obviously, safety measures, right, Drew?
Safety first.
Is things that he's created, that's come out of his mind, that he's made with his hands. And I just love talking knives, so for me, this is a geek out session, you know. Alan, tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
My name's Alan Folts. I've been making knives and things with my hands for about almost 30 years now.
30 years? How old
30
are you?
years. I'm 48.
Wow. Oh, man, so you started young. But you didn't start with knives, though, right?
No, I actually started pre-college. I started doing jewelry and armor work for some of the recreational societies, things like that. Moved into the knives. It was just a progression. Metal really kind of speaks to me, so.
Gotcha. So talk about the recreational stuff.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering what that was exactly.
There's a group called the SCA, which is the Society for Creative Anachronisms, and they try to replicate everything of life before the creation of gunpowder.
Huh.
So it's armor building, life, foods, clothing, everything. So when you go to one of their events, nothing modern is allowed.
Oh, wow. That's
So
super interesting.
It's a really neat place to learn skills and things like that. They actually fight in full armor, that kind of thing, and it's a very interesting, kind of step back in history kind of thing.
Sure.
Well,
Where does this occur?
Yeah, like that.
It's a worldwide organization.
Okay.
Drew and I just got really excited about this because I really want to dress Drew in armor now and let him go and do battle.
Yeah, that'd be a good thing to see. There's actually two groups in the area. One's based out of FIT, and one is based out of just the general area of Brevard, Space Coast.
Gotcha. So when you started doing that, you were building armor at that time?
Yeah, I was building armor, medieval jewelry, that kind of thing. I stepped forward to learn jewelry methods, construction techniques, casting, and then when I went into college, I did jewelry and sculpture and casting and welding and everything.
Now people don't understand. There's a lot of people that don't understand what casting is. Can you talk about casting?
Well, the casting it's a very interesting process, but you're actually pouring molten metal into a form. So we learned lost wax and lost styrene casting, which you put the wax in the form, and then you heat the form up, which vaporizes the wax and leaves an empty impression of where the metal will get poured. So it's a very neat concept, and honestly, I've been doing this working metal for more than 30 years, and you learn more every single time you do something.
So when you say that, are you basically like creating a mold almost?
You are. You're creating a wax form of what you want cast.
Okay.
Then the wax gets put into a heat-proof, basically almost like a plaster.
Sure.
And then it gets brought up to over 1,000 degrees. That vaporizes the wax and leaves an empty hole, basically,
right
where it was, and then the molten metal follows that into the hot mold.
Oh.
Now I've seen them do that with pommels.
Yeah, they do that with. I mean, a lot of jewelry is done that way. If it's not stamped out, it's usually investment cast, which is what that is.
Wow, and so you do a lot of that by hand.
All of that, all the making, the wax, everything else, that was all done by hand back then.
Wow, that's crazy.
It's neat. It's just metal's always kind of been instinctual for me. I figure out how to work it, figure out what I can do with it, and it's you know where you're going.
So you started off making the armor different type of metal than what you would do to make knives.
Well, yeah, it's steel, but it's not carbon steel. It's not hardenable most of the time. Most of the time, it's just same stuff. Your sheet metal in your car is made out of, just a lot thicker
and easier to work with.
It's different. It's you learn processes in everything I've done that translate into the knives. The nice thing about the knives to me is you're working with all sorts of different materials. You're really kind of refining whatever you can do, whether it's carving or grinding or machining or heat treatment or anything like that. Everything's involved. So.
What kind of steels do you like to work with?
Personally, I like the Damascus steels, the multi-layered steels, things like that.
Now I'm a nerd, and I've been loving my Damascus steel for a very long time. Talk about Damascus steel, because I think the process of making Damascus steel is awesome. Like just the watching the layering, a layer count that you have in there. Talk about how you make that.
Well, a lot of the Damascus here that's on the table in front of you is actually made by people that specialize in that. I've done it before. It's a very, very labor-intensive process. Personally, I like to leave those things up to the people that specialize in it. So, there's Damascus from 3 different countries right here on the table.
That's crazy.
Wow. So really when I'm choosing my materials, I can go out there and nitpick exactly who I wanted to make that pattern and that Damascus by what they stand out, what their specialty is. I don't go as far as to make my own anymore because it was so labor intensive. I could have spent the last 30 years just trying to perfect my Damascus game, not my knife making in general. Wow.
Now with there's obviously different types of Damascus.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking earlier, raindrop Damascus, there's ladder Damascus. What other styles of Damascus is there?
It's unending. I've seen everything from bubble wrap Damascus to scrambled egg pattern to, bacon patterned Damascus. All sorts of different things. It's really endless because it can be manipulated by folding, by stacking the layers, by manipulating the layers in shape and grinding. And then there's even processes that now use powders. So they layer powders instead of layering sheets, and they can impress some of the pattern into it before it's ever forged out into a bar.
Yeah, see, a lot of people don't realize with Damascus, it's a layering process. Those layers are welded together, then it's forge welded and pressed, and then folded and folded and folded, and then, like you said, then there's adding in the powders. Look at some of the designs that people create. It just is mind blowing to me.
So. Sorry, what is your process kind of like? Because, it looks like there's basically just, like, our artistic masterpieces sitting right here in front of us. When you say there's different types of Damascus or people that specialize in making Damascus in multiple countries, you said in 3 different countries laying on the table right now, like, do you kind of, like, conceptualize the knives in, like, the way that you would conceptualize almost like a painting or some sort of kind of art piece, like you're going to reach out to one specific Damascus maker for a specific conceptualization of a knife? Or
that really depends on what I'm trying to do. If I'm trying to make a showpiece, I always conceptualize without the materials involved at all.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I'll design the knife out, I'll get a nice profile, I'll get the shapes I want, the mechanism if it's a folder, or the shape if it's a fixed blade, and then I'll really look at that design and see what that design calls to me as. I've made knives very, very traditionally with traditional materials and the combinations of things that would go together.
Right.
Or I step the other direction and go, super modern materials but an old design. You can really, the sky's the limit.
So I guess that's kind of what I'm asking. Like, where does that, like, what's your process? Like, where does that inspiration come from?
I think in 3 dimensions. So whenever I handle anything and whenever I look at something, it could be anything from a vegetable peeler to a scalpel to a tool, of any kind. You really kind of you get these shapes and how they work with the body, really.
Okay.
And then I like to pull in a lot of the almost historical reference there. I try to keep certain things like a Persian shaped blade, a bolo shaped blade from a different culture, a long dagger like they would have used in World War I.
Sure.
Things like that. You can kind of perceive a character to it just by its shape.
Sure.
And sometimes I'm matching materials to that culture, and sometimes I'm, breaking out and doing the exact opposite thing. I've actually made a Spanish-style Bowie, which is a very ornate, large blade. Excuse me. But then outfitted it totally Japanese with a Japanese heat treatment, a silk wrap and race skin, laminated copper for all the fittings, and built everything by hand. And it's just being able to mix up those
kind of like hybrid, like
you're mixing up a genre
creative with it.
One shape and style with a different culture's method, materials, everything else. So it allows you to do just about anything you want.
Yeah, and I you bring up the whole like different cultures. Obviously, Japanese swords, everything that has come from other societies, has had their own process, their own like historical way of making it. Obviously, you're still going to be you're having fire and metal, but like hamon lines and things that are just little accents that different cultures use. Is there a lot of things that you look for to try and incorporate into like your personal design, your personal mentality?
Well, you're kind of having to, as you go along, learn those different techniques and those different processes from those other cultures to try to bring that into your work. A Hamon line was something that was done because of the steel that they had at the time, and they wanted the durability. But honestly, with modern steels, you have to pick the right steels, or else you can do all the work and it never shows. So you have to be a metallurgist. You have to, look at the culture. You have to look at what you've kind of gotten your grasp of, what you've learned yourself, and then add on to it. So you're combining from all these cultures and all this work, of previous generations from all over the world. And there was times in this 30 years ago when I started, they were still trying to figure out how Damascus was made. They were still doing, research. And honestly, bladesmiths stepped out of the box where industry wasn't going to do that kind of work, and proved that some of this stuff that's done mainstream now was actually feasible. Mm-hmm. Like stainless Damascus. This piece here has got stainless Damascus on it. And at the time, industry said, we can't weld those two together like that. We cannot manipulate it like that. And the bladesmiths stepped forward and proved that it could be done. And it's been done over and over and over in the generations, and now it's almost commonplace to where these things are manufactured in factories and things like that. But the people that really went back and looked at it and figured out the techniques were the bladesmiths and the knife makers. So it's something that you're never limited to what you can do.
Now, you bring up talking about just the aspect of the building. There was a time where people were getting away from the mindset of trade, and they got to, whatever their career was going to be focused on. But we'd gotten away from the mindset of the craftsman.
Yeah.
You bring that to the table when you design these knives. I mean, these are you. These are Alan. This is an extension of you.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. Like so you start to finish design and everything.
Yeah, everything.
Like, the designs in the. See, I'm not a knife geek so this is the first I'm kind of learning about this. So like even the designs within the grip is that.
Yeah, absolutely everything. How it's shaped, how thick it is. Every single little aspect is done start to finish.
Wow, that's awesome.
Now, how did you do this?
That's all done by hand with basically a carbide burr.
What?
This is all cut by hand with a rotary tool.
Now, I'm going to show you this because I'm going to try and see if I can get the angle. And I mean, that's all textured. I mean, that's insane. I mean, that's not just a design in the scale. This is, I mean, it's 3-dimensional. That's insane.
Thank you. I take insane and weird and strange as a compliment.
No. I mean, that's when you're a craftsman. I mean, I love seeing stuff like this.
Every single one handmade.
Yep, everything start to finish.
How long does it take? So like that one, for example, like how long would it take you to make that?
That honestly would take me probably around 2 days to make the knife, and then probably another day to carve it.
Wow.
Now, what kind of steel is this in this one?
That's actually CPM 154 made out of New York State.
Wow.
Nice.
Wow, that's insane. Now, when you first started off, obviously you were a rookie.
Oh, yeah.
How, what did you start with as a forge?
Honestly, it was a steel pipe covered in refractory cement and a vacuum cleaner to blow the air into it.
Wow.
A big gas burner just made out of pipe fittings and a 20-pound propane tank, and you go from there. It's really, you learn as you go, and if it doesn't work, you start over.
A buddy of mine did something similar, but he used a Chivas Regals can.
Yeah.
That's how he started off. Basically for his heat. I mean, man, I'm looking at this. Your plunge, how did you come up with just your overall design thought process? Like, you just sit down and look at history, or is there something that you go, you know what, I wonder if that would look cool, and then you draw it out?
I have probably 5,000 folders designed, and that's where my attention really lies now. It's, a modern age, it's harder to carry a fixed blade without, drawing attention to yourself. So the folder is, to me, the pocket clipped folder is our version of the little slip joint pocket knife that went in your grandfather's pocket.
Yep. Yeah.
So I try to put my efforts there. Really, the folders start with the mechanism. Everything on the inside gets designed and then the rest of the design has to revolve around that working mechanism.
That makes sense.
So you're designing engineering first, and then you're going design around it. But from all the years that I've had in jewelry and in other things, you get your own sense of design. Where if I design a 4-inch folding knife with a drop point blade and have another maker design a 4-inch folding knife with a drop point blade, they're never really anywhere close to each other. It's something where the individual's design cues stand out. Your knives should be able to be recognized from 10 to 15 feet away if you're a custom maker.
Wow. Now this obviously is liner lock.
Yep, liner lock.
Liner lock. Yeah, that's. How many do you do? A lot of your knives with this type of locking system?
Yes, the liner lock, the frame lock. It's a very versatile system to me. I'm working with a few other makers with some patented designs now, with some different locking mechanisms and things like that. But as far as staying modern, that's pretty much across the board. They're liner locks and frame locks.
Got you. Safety aspect of it. Obviously, these pop in. They're pretty good as far as safety. Knife's not going to close on your hand.
It depends on how they're designed. A lot of what I do is the lock's only accessible from the edge. The only problem is you're putting your hand in the way of closing it. But what I don't do is I don't put a giant relief here. Mm-hmm. So when you're gripping this knife, the meat of your hand isn't accidentally touching that lock release. It's little design cues.
Gotcha.
It's just looking at what works and why it works, and just perfecting it as far as you can. Nothing is foolproof.
Yeah.
I mean, even a fixed blade, you can put enough tension to shatter a blade and cut yourself on the shard. Mm-hmm. But really, it's just taking its weakest point and making sure that is as infallible as you can.
It's funny. I carry expensive knives. My wife would tell you that. You could probably pay off a car with all the knives I have. It's all good. It's a great collection to have. About that. Thanks, honey. But I've had guys, be like, "What does it matter if you buy a $250 knife or a $10 knife at the flea market?" And that drives me crazy because just looking at the design, the craftsmanship, the safety aspects of it. I tell people, they're like, well, whatever happened if you ever got hurt at work? It wouldn't matter if you had a $200 knife or a $10 knife. I go, yes, it would, because if anything ever happened, I would at least be able to say, that was a $400 knife. That, it was a good quality craftsman knife. Now, what do you tell people that are like, it doesn't matter what type of knife you have? I mean, I think that's a huge fallacy.
Well, honestly, I always tell people, carry what you buy. It doesn't matter if it's a $5 knife to me or $500 or a $5,000 knife. I mean, I've seen knives that, crest at $100,000.
What?
And it's just about the person that's buying it. Honestly, if you're buying custom knives, you're not really, you're in a different league.
Yeah.
It's
hear that, honey? I'm in a different league.
It's just what you love. You're buying something that is catered towards you a lot of times, and it's very limited. It's not like, there's knives on this table that are one of a kind. They'll never be made like that again. There's knives on this table that are prototypes and were built to see if I liked how it turned out. It's really just, it's about your personal preference. But the thing is, as long as you carry it, to me, I don't build a lot of knives that are just pure collector. It's to me, there's a difference between buying a knife and putting it in a safe and buying a knife and carrying it and enjoying it as a tool. Because that's really, when it comes down to it, that's all it is.
And functionality.
That's what I was just going to ask about that. Like, what is kind of the functions behind the different knives on the table?
It's got a function, and honestly, that's going to depend on what you're trying to do with it. A double-edged dagger is not there to, put peanut butter and jelly on your sandwich, but it will.
Yeah.
So, it really comes down to...
That's a soundbite, Jesse, right there. That's a soundbite.
It really comes down to what you're trying to do, and there's always a knife designed that will work ideally for what you're doing in the way you do it. So long flowing edges for skinning and cutting, that kind of thing. I mean, look at kitchen knives. There's different shapes for a reason. Every one of them's gauged and designed to do something specific better than the rest of the shapes.
Now, I obviously I'm looking at what you have here. Do you do like kitchen knives type stuff too?
Yeah, kitchen knives are hard to sell because they're sold everywhere. You can get a kitchen knife for $5 at Walmart. A fully functional kitchen knife. I can't touch the materials on something as large as a kitchen knife for $25.
Yeah.
So I can't sell for $5 what I paid $25 in materials to make.
Sure.
So it's a hard sell because people see those things as disposable tools. Unfortunately, most people don't know how to sharpen their own knives, let alone their own kitchen cutlery.
Yeah.
So they almost become use it until it's dull, buy a new one and throw the old one away kind of mentality. And in the custom knife route, that is not an affordable way to do it.
Gotcha. You notice, like for me, a good chef's knife. I love a good chef's knife. Not only do they hold their edge a lot longer, but when you resharpen them, it seems to just really grab. Do you do things like that also?
Yeah, I have in the past, and what you'll really find is that most kitchen knives, even if they're name brand, $100 kitchen knife, it's still made in a factory with 5 or 6 other lines of knives at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and the repeatability and the performance that you'll get out of that still isn't what it could be.
Yeah.
I know people that sell kitchen knives in carbon steels and stainless steels, and they're sold by the inch. I mean, they're very, very expensive to get into, but honestly, where you'll see the performance in a modern steel and a very, very close attention to detail is in a kitchen knife. You use it a lot. You put it through things that it really shouldn't do, regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people that all the time. If you have a mother, a sibling, whatever, that likes to cook, buy them one custom kitchen knife. Figure out which knife they use the most. Buy them one custom knife to match that size and shape, and they will never buy a Walmart special ever again, because the difference in how that knife will perform, it really stands out in that kind of environment.
Sure. Absolutely. It's interesting when you start collecting customs, because once you feel you can literally hold that knife in your hand and feel the difference between that and a lot of Walmart type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The quality and the craftsmanship, the quality and the handle, even the construction of, like, when you start collecting, you start to be able to pay attention to how they do their pins, just in holding the scales on. When you started developing that part of your game, the scales part, doing some of this design, how did you learn how to do that?
A lot of trial and error. I think knife makers in general have this innate ability to move on.
Mm.
We obsess about certain things and we keep at it until we, accomplish what we're shooting for. It's also a great group of people, as far as I've been in a lot of little industries over my life, and knife making is one of the few that there isn't competition. So if I see a maker doing something that I'm struggling with, I can step right up to that maker and say, hey, I've been trying to do this. Would you mind, sharing with me?
Out.
And they'll share their techniques, their materials, their tooling lists. A lot of them will invite you right into their shop to show you how they do it. And it's that mentality of, the same as we were talking about before, is relearning those skills that we've lost as a culture.
Mm-hmm.
But the knife makers are having to learn it by, a lot of times, trial and error. But they look at another maker and they don't want to see that other person struggle. So makers are very open to other makers and sharing their techniques, sharing their, everything from materials to, hey, I'm trying to do this and it's not working. They'll invite you in and show you how to do it.
It's more kind of collaborative than competitive.
It's family. It's like a family mentality.
At that point, you don't want to be the one craftsperson in their shop struggling with something.
Right.
If somebody's done it before, we're all learning, even if we're learning from how somebody else failed at it.
Sure.
So it's one of those things where, veteran makers, 20 years ago were very, very good to me. When I first started building folders, it's you're learning this whole mechanism, how everything fits together, and there was no books.
Right.
The books that were written in the 60s and 70s, and they were a whole different kind of folder than what we were trying to make at the time. So those makers would step forward and show me how to do things and answer my stupid questions, even though to them it was commonplace. It's when we all learn how to do something, then we're moving on and we're advancing it. The amount that knife technology, if you can call it that, there's been knives for millennia,
Mm-hmm.
but the amount that technology has advanced just in the last 20 years is phenomenal.
No, one of the things I've noticed, even talking with you before this, a lot of the people that are in that craftsman community are willing to, the older generation is willing to teach the younger generation because they want to see the craft continue. They want to see the trade develop. They want to see it not get left behind, not be something that becomes forgotten. And there are lately, obviously, the last few years, we've seen TV shows like Forged in Fire that have brought the interest back to design for maybe people who weren't into it before. There's a lot of guys I know that'll talk to me about Forged in Fire and knife making now because they're like, oh, I saw this. I didn't even know that was possible to be done by hand. Because everybody today is taught, use a CNC machine, use this, carbon copy, not get out there, where's your anvil, get your forge going, and let's hammer this out, And so it's been really cool to watch people get reinterested in the trade, in the craft. Has that, since we've started to see shows like this pop up, has that changed knife sales for you? Have that changed interest?
It's changed a lot of the market because really when you look at it, there's a lot of people that are exposed to it that have never been exposed to it. So there are people that'll say, hey, I can do that in my own garage. What you get is this large surge in makers. But honestly, I've been doing this 30 years, and if I don't learn something with every knife I build, I switch it up. I go to do something else. Because it's really kind of the growing of the craft for me, not just the being able to manufacture something.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
What it really does is it puts a lot of makers out there in the market, but not a lot of makers that have the kind of experience that they need to pass that on to another generation.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you'll look at shows like Forged in Fire and there's 4 competitors and they're doing it 4 completely different ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that any of them are wrong, but you need to master what you know, not just, go out there and throw it into the wind and see what happens.
Yeah.
Really it's patience and practice and everything else. One thing with that show people a lot of times don't understand is it's been on for 6 years now.
Yeah.
There's people that go on there with 4 years of experience. All the experience they've had, they've learned from Forged in Fire, which is learning again from other people's mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not giving yourself enough time to really figure it out on your own.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a large mistake recently is makers will go the CNC route or they'll go the Forged in Fire route and they think that's all that there is. They don't push themselves past what they can see and what they can see on the internet. To me, YouTube's another example. It used to be there were no books written on this subject. Now there's makers showing things on YouTube, and honestly, when you look at it from an established maker's perspective, 90% of what they show you is wrong or dangerous.
Right.
That's an awesome point because we talk about that just in leadership because Drew and I are both big leadership focused people, and there's a lot of people that when motivational speaking started to be a thing, they were like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
I can be a motivational speaker, but the information that they're giving is pushing people down the wrong path.
Yep.
I'm a big push. My big thing is reasonable goals and reasonable time frames. I'm not going to tell you can do a million things all in a week because that's a lie. That's not the truth. But a lot of these motivational speakers come in, they speak to somebody for 4 or 5 hours, and then everybody leaves and they're on fire for that for 2 or 3 weeks, and then that fire starts to fade away. Same with y'all. The goal is to continue it, to make the mind become part of the process,
Sure.
You can't just learn to make knives overnight.
Well, growth comes through failure too, right? Yeah. So like the more you fail, the more you're going to grow and the better you're going to become,
Yeah.
And ultimately, there's something to learn through that.
I kind of tie it to instinct. What you're trying to do is build your skills to the point where you don't even have to think about it. You know what that's going to do when you do a specific operation. You know, when you've screwed something up, even to that point. But knowing just instinctually when you're doing something right or wrong, just by your previous experiences, is being your own motivational speaker, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
You're kind of adding to your own failures, to your own successes, and continuing forward no matter how many times you fail at it. I don't want to know how many knives I threw in a bucket or out the door at a tree. Mm-hmm. I really don't want to know how many I failed at. But the thing is, I always strive forward past that.
Sure.
And it's the society has changed.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people want things taught to them, given to them, passed to them. And this is not something you can just, pick up a pamphlet and all of a sudden you're a knife maker.
Well, especially like with the intricacies of what you do too. Like, I mean, I work in mental health and substance abuse, right? And a lot of the things that we talk about are, mindfulness meditation and how to like kind of grow, right? And be one with ourselves and holistically healthy, right? And like, this isn't, the intricacies of like what you're doing have to be, so kind of specific and on point, like that it's almost easy to fail at, right? So, it somewhat builds to me, kind of builds like emotional resilience, right? Like, because it's so intricate and so there's such a process to it that there's gonna be failure, and the more that happens, the better your craft becomes, and you kind of keep moving past and developing and learning.
It's funny that you mentioned that as holistic health, because this is my holistic health.
Sure.
I've only been a full-time maker for the last 10 years. I got unemployed. I got myself put in a position where I had time, and that was it. So I put myself into this even further than I already was the 20 years before it. But for 20 years, I had a full-time job, had house to take care of, everything to take care of, and the knife making was a few hours a week. But I found that if I wasn't creating, if I wasn't pushing myself past these barriers,
sure,
that I wasn't happy. It was one of those things like, it's that strive to create, and it's that strive to perfect that thing that you messed up the last time. Mm-hmm. It's pushing your holistic health into betterment, and understanding that this is, something that you can set your mind to and push yourself past. It's getting that mindset of not letting, failure get in your way.
No,
Sure.
It's got to feel awesome also when you see people carrying this. That people not only want what you do, but it's functional and practical for what they need. I look a lot at, like I said, design, sometimes handle material, what would be functional for me, especially working in law enforcement. What is a practical knife for me? What is not a practical knife? I've recently gotten into fixed blades a lot. And you're right, they're a little bit harder to conceal, but functionality.
When you say fixed blades, you're talking like a Rambo knife?
No, like this.
Oh, okay.
There's something like this.
Oh, because it doesn't close. Okay. I was
doesn't
thinking
close.
like one of the big, like,
no,
gnarly.
No, something like this that, good finger placement, functional use. It could be anything. Could be a good example, cutting an airbag out of a car. With a lot of the new airbags, there's a lot of the side airbags that come down. For me, sometimes I like to know exactly what I'm pulling and exactly what that purpose is for. Something like this, I like a lot of fixed blades right now. It's just something I've just really got into. You work with a lot of folders, and from the craftsman, I can go, yeah, absolutely. The intricacies that go into making a proper folder that is functional and concealable is amazing. I started off collecting folders, moved into out the fronts automatics, and then started getting into, like I said, fixed blades, looking for specific craftsmen that do specific things. I recently bought a competition chopper. But looking for somebody who makes a proper competition chopper, there are some things you got to worry about. Edge retention, how the edge is designed, what you're going to be using to cut. A lot of people don't think about that when they go to buy a knife because they don't have the background that you have or what some collectors have. I've never sat in a shop. I've never done this. What I look for is the quality in the person. You got to the point where 10 years ago you were able to support yourself making knives. How did that come around?
Well, honestly, a lot of that happened because I got into a situation where I could collaborate with a company. Okay, so right now, was known for years and years and years for small fixed blades. As a custom maker, it's not an easy route. To pay your bills, you're working, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, and you're trying to make sure that you can pay your bills. It's really hard to make minimum wage making knives when you start out. Mm-hmm. Anything at all. You're lucky to cover your own materials and your learning process to get that done.
Sure.
Well, I got myself in a situation where someone that I knew and respected that wrote for one of the knife magazines really, really liked a knife that I made, and he said, I want your permission to take this to a company. He said, I think there's a space in the market for it. I think you really nailed the design. And this was about 13 years ago.
Wow.
And he stepped forward to the company, and the company said, we'll give it a try. And this is 13 years ago, and that knife is still for sale through that company all across the world.
That's awesome.
That's got to feel pretty amazing.
It is. It's when it first starts out, you don't know what you've done, because as a custom maker, that can be the beginning or the end of your career.
Sure.
Because if you put out something and the company doesn't represent you well, or they put out a crap product, that's what people are going to look at you for. But luckily, I was with the right company at the right time, and they have sold that knife and now 7 other renditions of it.
That's awesome.
Over the last 13 years, and we're still developing more. We're developing new products, and we're trying to make sure that we can fit that niche. It's the same knife that I could sell custom, but it's sold to the world at a $19.99 price point.
That's
and
awesome.
There it gets right back to do you carry the $5 knife or the $500 knife?
Sure.
At that point, for me, that's an ideal situation, because it puts my design out to the public where everybody could afford it, and to be able to put your design that works into somebody's hands and have them use it, even if you didn't make it, is I still think a point that a lot of people that look at custom knives miss completely. They look at a $500 knife. Well, if there's a $50 knife of that same thing made by a company, you can try out that design and see if it works for you without being into custom knives. Most people don't know custom knives exist. They really don't. I think
it's interesting you bring up the whole working with a company thing. That's how originally I'm shopping for knives, looking through, and I see this is a Alan Folts design on this website. And as I'm going through, I'm like, it actually had the location of where you were from. Mm-hmm. And it said Melbourne, Florida. And I was like, I'm in Melbourne, Florida. What's the odds, So that's when I reached out to you. Because for years, I had seen this knife design on this website. I didn't know that this was being made right in my own hometown. And I thought that was awesome. And you're right. That specific company, I own many a knife from that company.
And it's not made in your hometown. It's designed by me, and it's licensed by them. They manufacture it and handle everything else.
Yep.
All I do is the particular company you're talking about doesn't have their own designers. They look towards the custom market and the custom makers
awesome.
To design their knives. Too. And because we're basically doing their market research.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great marketing design when you think about it, because they already know it works.
Yeah.
They're just investing in what's already works. But I thought it was great that the designer was from my town. And like I said, I own many a knife from that company over the years. I think I've been carrying one in my left pocket of my uniform pants for 16 years. Still a highly functional knife. I still use it. It's a standard pocket folder, clip in the pocket. But
there you go. You're carrying a cheap knife.
Yep.
And you know what? There's a market for everybody. But it doesn't. To me, it doesn't excuse a well-built and well-designed knife. It's a tool that you're sometimes relying on for your life, or someone else's. Whether it's defense or something else. I think a tool needs to be designed properly and made, even if it's a $5 tool.
Sure.
So there's the difference between them. If there's a $5 knife that's designed well and it functions properly and it's reliable, I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Well, and that thought process has gotten lost in our society a lot today too. Where when you say whether it's $5 or $500, it should still be functional. It still should be made properly.
And that's the thing is there's quite a few that you get that are $5 and you go like this, and the whole blade goes
snap
back and forth. Those are the ones I'm talking about. Those are the cheap knives that scare me. That I see a lot of people pull out and they're like, oh no. I'm like, ooh, good. Blade's turning sideways as you're trying to just cut a string right now.
I usually have a drawer in my shop that has production samples or something from the companies I work with, knives that were affordable and I bought just to see how the mechanism worked, things like that, and I keep them. And I wait for somebody to come into my shop that carries one of those finger cutters, something that's going to do them more harm than good as a tool.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I say, hey, can I see your knife? And they hand it to me and I throw it directly in the trash. And I reach in the drawer and I grab them something that's a step up. But it's really just it's I think as a maker it's your responsibility to educate your customer as well as it is to sell something to your customer. If my customer's buying the wrong thing, I want to be able to tell them they're buying the wrong thing and why. Especially people, law enforcement, firefighters, people that are relying on these tools
Sure.
for life and limb. That my knife opens boxes and mail 90% of the time. But when it has to do something, I want it to be capable of it. So even if a customer comes to me and I think that they're going the whole wrong direction on something that they're trying to order for themselves, I'm not afraid to tell them, because I think as a maker, that's part of my responsibility, is to educate my customers as well as to profit from them. If I profit from somebody and something bad happens, it's on me.
Yeah, plus you don't want that reputation of being that guy that's just pushing.
Well, the reputation at that point is not my problem. My problem is, I don't want harm to come to somebody from a decision that I didn't step in and say, hey, you're going to hurt yourself for somebody else. And really, these are tools. Just like anything else, it's the person behind them 90% of the time, but that doesn't mean they know exactly what they need or want.
Yeah, and I've never even thought of it that way, which is kind of funny and actually ironic, and I'm probably going to buy one of these after the show. But I run into, last week, dude, especially in South Florida for my business, I run into a lot of dope holes and pull people out, and there's times when I can't wait for law enforcement to get there or whatever. If someone's in danger, they're about to OD or something, normally I try to get them to meet me across the street or something, or to McDonald's or public place, or one kind of cops, but there's sometimes where I just can't, and I can't have a concealed carry, which we all know my story. So I have a knife, and that's the one thing I have to go in and help this person. If there's some point where my life's in danger or their life's in danger, that's the only thing I have besides my bare hands to protect myself. And I've never even thought about not necessarily the functionality of it, because it'll probably work, but if it could break, if it could snap, if it's rickety, if I could cut myself before, so I needed to protect myself, you know what I mean? And now I'm if that's making me think about, should I, put a little more thought into that, because could save my life or someone else's.
Is it worth the $2 extra?
Yeah.
Really, when it comes down to it, you have to look at what the tool's doing for you.
Yeah. I look at a lot of things from the safety standpoint of, even if I'm going to be carrying it, just in my pocket like normal, if I got into a car crash, can I get my seatbelt off?
Yeah.
I've taken knives out of guys' pockets and done this on my finger, and there's no edge to it. And I'm like, how do you expect to help somebody if you can't even open a letter with this?
Mm-hmm.
How, you can't even open the tape on an Amazon package. What are you doing?
So some of my knives that have sold the best over the years were designed for a particular purpose. So the little one that I licensed to that company, that was designed because when I was in a canoe or kayak, I couldn't get my pocket knife out of my pocket. I couldn't do it.
That's exactly why I started going to...
Yeah, so a small fixed blade that was mounted up here to a personal flotation device was my only tool if I was tangled in rope, or I was underneath the mangroves getting caught in monofilament line, or if I had a snake in my boat or anything else. So just having a tool and being able to access it, knowing that it'll be there and knowing that it'll do what you need it to do is the process. It's just knocking down this won't do this won't do this, and getting those things out of your rotation at all. You need to be able to... I'm a big person on regularity. I've been carrying the same pocket knife in my pocket for 10 years, in the same place, in the same brand of shorts. I can reach down, open it in the dark, and know exactly where the edge is, no matter what I do. So I'm big on finding what works for you and sticking with one option, because you get this muscle memory and you get this presence where you know where your tool is, you know how long that blade is, you know the shape of it. You know if it's backwards or upside down in your hand just by the feel of it. So getting used to it and finding the right tool, I think, is the most people's struggle. Yeah. Most people think a knife is a knife, and it's really not that. But just making sure that what you have is proper for what you're using it for, and then carrying it long enough to get used to it. It's training.
Now,
it really is.
You brought up the whole muscle memory aspect of it. There's a lot of you get into a car crash, you have to do something where you're threatened and you have to react. You go into gross muscle movement at that time. Your thought processes are different. having that familiarity, that repeated training is what gives you that good muscle memory. So if you do go into gross muscle movement, it just comes like second nature to you, you know? I thought it was interesting you brought up the kayaking aspect of why you originally created the knife you created, because it was a functionality aspect. Same thing for me. I started looking at push blades, daggers, whether it be double-edged, single-edged, just for the fixed blade of the functionality of what I was looking for. If I needed to cut a seatbelt, if I needed to break a window, if I needed to cut an airbag out, the functionality wasn't what I had. Wasn't what I was carrying at the time. And then I started looking at what would be functional. And quite honestly, when I was looking at functionality, that's when I came across your name, and I thought, wow, that's just interesting. Just from the functionality standpoint, from thinking about design. Now, you've been doing this for 30 years. Yeah, your full-time job for the last 10. Where do you see yourself in the future?
I don't know. It gets a point where you're very strained as a single person. You know, as a single individual in one shop making knives with my hands, you are very, very constrained on how much you can produce.
Sure.
So I don't see myself making more and more knives as years go on. I see myself making less and less knives as years go on. I still consider working with the companies, you know, because I think I make much more of an impact on people in general at the point of being able to reach them worldwide. You know, if you're a guy and you can make 10 items a year, you're going to reach 10 people. If you can, you know, send out 10,000 items a month, you're reaching, you know, 120,000 people in a year.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really the impact of how you're reaching and what you're doing with your designs. Custom knives aren't for everybody. I know they aren't. My demographic is a percentage of a percent.
Sure.
You know, so really when it comes down to it, I'm going to be making custom knives for the rest of my life. That doesn't mean I'm going to be selling them. Doesn't mean I'm going to have a market for what I'm making, but I'm going to make because I like to make. You know, because it drives me to make new designs that possibly would get picked up by a company, by anything else. The only other operation you can do there is you can either mechanize, you can get yourself a CNC machine, hire yourself some employees, and make your custom knives into a company. And I've known many makers that have done that. But for me, it takes me out of that continual development of skills. You know, and that's what really I as I said before, I have a need to create. So when I don't have that creation or that struggle, I feel it's mundane. I might as well have a normal job. So for me, I see myself making less, but contributing more to the companies, contributing more designs out to the general public and things like that. But I'll never stop making. It's one of those things that drives me. I'll get in the shop and I'll make things and I might find something new. And it's happened before.
Like you said, too, it's kind of like part of your like self-care, too. You're like comfortable when you're doing that and feel kind of at peace, you know?
I moved away for about 13 years, moved to North Carolina. And when I moved there, I didn't have a shop. And it drove me batty. I mean, it was like there was just something missing where my brain was saying, hey, you could do this. Oh, no, you can't.
Sure.
You know, there was nothing to work on. So at a certain point, it drove me crazy enough that I set up my workshop in a 6-foot by 8-foot screen porch on the 3rd floor of an apartment building. You know, and I made what I could make. It made me happy. It let me evolve.
I could imagine that right now. Like I'm picturing you just like hammering out, getting things done, and people being like, "What the hell is going on up there?" And you're like, just forging some knives, just hanging out, you know.
It was interesting.
Don't mind me.
It was interesting because after a while, the maintenance crew figured out what I was doing. That I was, you know, had machines and tools and stuff like that up there, and instead of getting mad and telling me I couldn't do it, they would bring me things they couldn't fix.
That's funny.
So it's always, you know, you
help
always
us out.
you don't want to be a member of society that's like, oh, that guy's weird. Don't go anywhere near him. It's dangerous in there. You want to make sure that people understand that this is a craft.
Sure.
It's just like somebody doing woodwork or leather work or sewing or anything else. This is just a skill that's been built into a craft, and that's something that as things get more and more mechanical, more and more computer controlled, more and more internet driven, society loses those skills. Look at how many people can actually change a tire on their own car or fix the plumbing in their own house. Now turn around and tell me how many of them can run a forge, a milling machine, a drill press, a lathe, can heat treat properly, no metallurgy, no metal finishing techniques, design, mechanics. And it really, this is one of those things that, I think if I wasn't doing this, I would have been, getting into car repair, and I'd be, it's just the drive. I needed to be into something.
It's funny. The knife maker Neil Kamamura?
Mm-hmm.
So he started off as a guy that just was working metal, working on cars.
Mm-hmm.
And he got into it, and, you just look at, for him, it was a huge mental health thing for him, just starting to design these knives, doing it not only with himself, but doing it with his son,
Yep.
and having that bond. And I always thought that was really cool. I got to meet him last year at SHOT Show. I actually just ran into him. I was like, "You're Neil Kamamura. You make knives." And, and I'm a nerd, and I know what you do. And that was pretty much the conversation. And, he made me feel tall because Neil's, up to my shoulder. But here's this dude that just said this was what I needed to do for me.
Sure.
And it's turned into all of this. And now, the guy's known internationally now as being a maker. And for him, it's just been such a self-pride thing, and just being able to share that with other people. And I learn a lot from that, just being able to see what you can do if you put your mind to it. I think a lot of people have gotten away from that. They're so into being able to go on their phone and look something up. They weren't in the Encyclopedia Britannica age like we were.
Right.
You want to look that up? Go get your Encyclopedia Britannica and go work your way through. You're gonna do the research. You're going to the library. Now it's super simple. You go on your phone. You look this up. They've gotten away from putting the effort in, making the craft. And for me, looking at custom knife makers is just being able to see the design, how the blade looks, how the scales look, even just picking up a knife and feeling the finger placement. For me, I just go, man, that is just this is something that doesn't need to die. This is something that needs to continue. I've talked to you about how you guys mentor, how do you teach, how do you get people into that? Is it like Star Wars? Is there a master and an apprentice? How does it work? Or do you have a Padawan that works under you that you kind of teach at times?
Well, see, there's a group of folks called the American Bladesmith Society, and they have that more Jedi mindset that you're talking about there.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's, master smith, journeyman smiths, apprentice smiths, all the way down, and they're proving themselves. But it's more of a group that standardizes your skill level.
Sure.
Gotcha.
Not that really teaches. They have a school in Texarkana that teaches classes, and they're sponsored by the ABS. There's a school in North Carolina that's sponsored by the North Carolina Custom Knife Makers Guild that teaches all sorts of classes. Or, the best way I found is to reach out to people that make around you. We're a very open group of people. I've taught over 50 people to step from fixed blades into folders, other makers. And it's really when other makers see the need that somebody needs to learn something or wants to learn something well enough, we step up and we do it. Because advancing the skills in this whole market is us, not just in us. Okay, because if we can advance the market, we can advance it for ourselves and for everyone else. We're making things that will hopefully last our lives, our children's lives, someone else's children's lives on down the way. We don't want it just to die with that. We want this to continue on forward.
What would you say to people that are thinking about getting it? Recently, a buddy of mine, Brad, he just started forging. He just got a whole setup at his house, and he's making fixed blades right now just as his starter way of doing things. What do you tell people that are thinking about getting into it?
Don't do it to make money. When you really step into the market, and this isn't for my benefit of having competition, because there really isn't competition in this. We all have our own style and our own things that we specialize in, and we all have our own customers. So there really isn't competition between makers. I've seen a lot of makers that step forward and say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make money at it. I'm going to, make this a job and, everything else. And what they don't understand what the learning curve is like. They don't understand how hard it is when you first start out. They don't understand how many years it really takes to establish your own style and your own place in this market. You might start out and do something completely different than what you make 10 years from then. I'd never started out making modern styled knives. I made more period pieces, daggers, short swords, axes, that kind of thing, traditional hunting knives. So it's nothing like I do now, but you have to find your place and find where it makes you happy. If this didn't make me happy, there's not enough money in the world to make me do it. This is stuff that you do for the love of it and for the advancement of it, not for pure monetary reasons. I know I see a lot of companies that start out and people that start out as makers that right off the bat, they start off with a CNC machine and know how to program.
Mm-hmm.
And they might make knives for 5 or 10 years, and then they find out that there's skills that they don't have that their machines are doing for them. I had a gentleman, I think it was 4 years ago at the Blade Show, come up to me and say, "Wow, that's really cool. I like how you did that." And he said, "I wish I could grind knives." And I looked at his name tag, and he just won Best New Maker that year. He doesn't know how to grind knives. So he was using his tools to supplement his skills, to replace them.
Gotcha.
Not to do things that couldn't be done other ways.
Sure.
I've always said it all along. We've done experiments with it in different knife groups, that you give a knife maker something to do, and you're going to end up with 12 knife makers with 20 different ways to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're that way. We try to figure things out on our own and try to figure out how to do things. It's not cut and dry. It's not a YouTube video.
Yeah.
It's practice, skill, and safety, is what it really is. Finding someone in your area that's an established maker that will take you under their wings and show you the basics will save you years and years and years of learning on your own, because you're learning from someone else's mistakes, not just from your own.
It's funny, when I was at SHOT Show this last year, I saw a guy, and he told me, I read his name tag, and I saw where he was from, and he wasn't from too far from here. And he was talking about his knives, and he was showing me pictures and a couple that he had on display. And I was like, "Oh, so what's your process?" And I asked him, and he was a CNC guy,
Mm-hmm.
And I started asking like specific questions, and it was his company, and he didn't know. Had no idea how some of the stuff was done, and it kind of caught me off guard. Like I was expecting him to do like what you've done, and I broke this down and did this and this, and this is the reason why I did it, through trial and error, through development, through learning from other people. He was like, "No, the machine cuts it, and I sell it. Like this, what don't you understand about this?" Right. And I was like, "Yeah, but you're selling it as a custom, and you're telling me your minimum price is $550 for this. It's a fixed blade, and you don't know how it was made, like." And I'm not calling him out on it. I'm letting him try to explain it to me, but he didn't know. It was very apparent that he didn't know, to the point where he referred me to the guy that was with him, and he goes, he can answer more of your questions. And at the time I was like, all right, he's just the guy that's either funding this or doesn't know any of the stuff that really goes into it. And I'm a novice, I don't know an iota of what you know. I know what I like. I know what I know feels good in my hand. And I know what I'm looking for, but a lot of what I pick up is from talking to guys like you, learning a little bit as I go, watching shows like Forge and Fire, like that I can sit back and go, all right, I understand what they're doing. I don't know how to do it, but I understand it, For a guy like me, who say is a novice, that comes forward and says, I'm looking for a knife, but I'm looking for this, say I'm looking for a standard hunter. What would you tell somebody to be looking for?
Honestly, if they're looking for a standard hunter, there's many, many companies that make one that are very established and have been around for 60, 70 years. If you really look in the market, those things have been made and perfected long ago. It's not necessarily you'd have to step up to a custom route. If you want to step up to a custom route, know what you want, but also take the advice of the person that's on the other side of that table. Because they might have more experience than you. The gentleman you talked to at SHOT Show, to me, isn't a knife maker. He's a machine operator.
Yeah, right. That's how I took it.
He built a craft as far as going, hey, I think I can make some money off this. Let's do it. But there again, I know makers that specialize in CNC work that make phenomenal knives. But they're honest with you. This is done with a CNC. This is done with this. But there's also makers that make things with a CNC that have the capability to step out there with a forge and a grinder and a drill press and make that knife. To me, it's important to know that the skill is behind it, not just the product. if that makes any sense.
Sure. How do you, like you've been doing a lot of, you said you started off doing some of the recreation stuff. How do you get the word out about what you do?
I honestly try to hide as much as I possibly can. because
there's another soundbite right there. That is it. That is kind of most of us, but
really, it's I want to make what I want to make. I get demands on what I should make to make money, but there's a very fine line in what makes you happy and what you should do and what you shouldn't do.
Is it like that mentality of being a sellout, not being a sellout too? Like,
I don't think there's really a sellout in this whole market. I really don't think there is. There's room for everybody. But the simple fact is that, I want to decide where I want to put my focus and where I want to advance.
You don't need to be dictated to you.
Exactly. And honestly, that started out my first 15 years of making, when people would come up with a crayon drawing on a cocktail napkin and say, I want this knife. And you look at it and it's like, it's not your style. You're not going to be known for it in the future. It's a crayon on a cocktail napkin. That's all it is. And a lot of times, if I see something like that, and I can tell that the person really wants it, I will put the bug in their ear just to try it themselves. Because if it's really that important to you to have what you designed, then learn to make it.
Yeah, design it.
It's not competition to me. I'd rather not be making it.
Awesome.
Early in my career, I even had the sense to know if I didn't want to make it, you doubled the price, and if they said yes, you made it anyway. But even at that, you're taking time away from doing what you should be doing to advance your own skills and your own designs and your own market. It's before the internet, this was all about name recognition. If people knew your name and knew what you specialized in, you had no problem selling a knife. If you didn't, they wouldn't buy it from you even if it looked like the best thing in the world. The internet has changed that completely. Now the internet has opened us up to people that have never made a knife before, put their first knife out on the market, and their first folder is $1,000 a piece, and they made 500 of them. It's gotten to the point where you have to be really open and honest with your customers how things are being created and why, or else they don't know.
Well, I mean, you seem to be true to the craft, not true to the dollar.
I am. The dollars come if you work for them.
Yeah.
So, going out there, and that's why I said I hide as much as possible. I can't keep up with the emails that I get on one model, let alone on my whole line of knives.
Sure.
Let alone have any time to make any new designs. So it gets to the point where that one person, not a company, not a CNC, not adding a new CNC machine to make more stuff, is very limited on what that one person can make in their lifetime. So the money will come if you're established in the market, you're honest with your customers, you're fair. To this day, I have people that even other makers that come to my table and it's like, how many of those did you make? And I tell them how many I made. And they're like, how much did you sell them for? And I tell them and they're like, you're too cheap. But I feel that's fair. So it really comes down to the point of relating to your customers on a level that they think is honest.
Sure.
So it's very, very simple. People either like it or they don't.
I like that.
Yeah.
No, I definitely like that. We've gotten away from, I don't want to say customer care, but being informative. So many times you go to do something, the person just wants to sell it. They don't want to give you what you need.
Being authentic and transparent.
Yeah.
Instead of bullshitting.
Yeah. Drew and I are very big on the word transparency. We love the word transparency. What you see is what you get. Steve Fernandez does not wear a shirt and tie. Steve Fernandez wears T-shirts and jeans. That's what I do. It doesn't mean anything about my education level. It doesn't mean anything else. Drew and I both have degrees, multiple degrees, some of us. It means nothing. If you're not genuine about it, if you're not transparent about why you're doing things. I get asked a lot, why do you guys do the podcast? You take time out of your own day to go do the podcast. I do it because there's been multiple people that we've talked to after doing some of these podcasts that have gotten help from some of the things that we've talked about. If we help one person, that's all we care about. Having you on today, this is a geek out session for me. Listening to you talk is a geek out session. Look, even Jesse's over there. He's geeking out too. I collect all different knives. The reason is Drew collects a bunch of tattoos. You know why? We like the maker. We like the guys who bring the art. I enjoy this because personally, I have never done it, and as far as my skill level goes right now, I can't do it, But I can watch you do it, and I can give you the credit that you deserve. Looking at some of this craft that's up here is insane. You know?
They're beautiful.
I mean, I can tell you, I like this. I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but I'm probably going to have one. That's all I'm saying. Maria's not watching right now. Hold on, let me check. Right? Oh shoot, she is watching. I mean, if this winds up in our gun safe, I've had this for 6 months already, just so you know.
I'll write your receipt for car repairs.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Alan. Thank you. But no, we really appreciate you coming in today and talking with us. We love what you do. We support the craft.
For sure.
People buy customs, buy quality, figure out what you need. I always have a knife on me. I've always had a knife on me since I was probably 16 or 17 years old. Knives are great. I've had people go, why do you always have a knife on you? Why do you always have to have a weapon on you? It's not a weapon.
It's a tool.
It's a tool. I mean, you have no idea how many airbags I've cut in my time because the drapes come down on the side and you got to make sure somebody's okay or get them out of a car or how it goes. You got to know what you need. You're never going to know if you're going to get in that car accident and you need to cut a seatbelt off of you or a seatbelt off your child or cut rope because you have to make a tourniquet or do something. You never know what you're going to need it for. I always tell people, if you're not a gun person, at least carry a knife. At least put something in your purse that if you need to cut something, you got it. I really appreciate everything you do. I really appreciate the craft. Like I said, I'm a huge geek. I've been collecting knives since I was a kid, To me, this is something that is a trade that needs to live on forever. It's a skill that needs to live on forever. It's our heritage. It's how swords were made back in the day that helped free countries and did battle to stop oppression. That's where this all stems from. If you could offer any words of wisdom before you take off, what would you tell people?
To the general listener, if you're interested in knives at all, if you like tools at all, seek out a custom show and talk to makers. You don't have to buy anything. They're not there to convert you or make anything else. Just talk to them and see what's behind what you carry. A lot of people are in this, they don't carry. They're in it for the simple love of the craft and what's behind it. And they're one of the most open and accepting group of people that I've ever been involved with in my entire life.
That's awesome, man. That is, Drew?
No, I don't really have too much, man. They're just gorgeous, dude. I was just blown away by, the artistic kind of underlying of them and they're works of art, man. So I really appreciate you.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming and sharing. I've learned so much. I don't know anything about this stuff, and I've learned so much from everything you've talked about, man. So we appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me out, guys. Appreciate it.
And Jesse, always good to see you.
Yes.
Like Jesse's been excited. Jesse's dressed up today because Jesse had to work. Usually Jesse's in his board shorts and t-shirt, but today he's got the dress pants on and the button up. So, Jesse,
can you tell us do you have like a website or anything like that, or?
I do. It's being reprogrammed at this point in time. You can reach me at foltsknives.com or on Facebook. Just look up Alan Folts. I'm pretty open to talk to anybody.
Cool. Thanks, man.
It's true. He talked to me, so
yeah.
He didn't yell stranger danger and text me back, So, but I appreciate everybody for listening. We'll be back next time. Old Red Bird will be back with us. Got to give him an opportunity to come back. Drew can't take all the glory from him.
Yeah.
But we'll see y'all next time.
All right.